Welcome everyone to this 30-minute session. I'll be chatting with Marom and really talking through how he's used AI within his organization to really improve lending practices. One thing that I do really would value is your interaction as an audience. So if you do have any questions as we move through this conversation, then feel free to put that in the questions and answers tab within Zoom, and we'll be able to weave those questions into the presentation. So myself, as Ivan says, I work as the Director of Artificial Intelligence here at H2O. I've been in this industry for over 2 decades now. And one thing that I love about my role is that I can work with talented individuals and organizations that are looking to embed machine learning into their processes. And I've been working with Marom for a number of years now and built up a really good friendship with him. So it's a real honor to have him on this particular call. So Marom, obviously I know you, but the audience don't. So introduce yourself.
Sure. Hey, John. Glad to be here. So my background's actuarial, but my current role is more being head of analytics and machine learning at Airvantage, mostly focusing on credit and marketing applications. I'm very passionate about machine learning, the technical side, the business side, actually the whole range of it. So I get very excited talking about this stuff. So very excited for our session today.
Awesome. Awesome. So you work for Airvantage, who are obviously, well, not obviously, but they're headquartered in South Africa. But probably many of our audience don't actually know what Airvantage do. So could you just explain just a really high level of what Airvantage do?
Sure. So Airvantage is a fintech company. We're headquartered in South Africa, but there is offices around the world, in South America, Mauritius as well. And the company works specifically in the telecommunications industry. So we help telecommunications company issue financial products. One of our major products is an airtime lending service where we give airtime on advance. And that's where the machine learning and the credit and all of that comes in.
Awesome. That's great. So over the next 20 minutes, then we're going to obviously go through the journey and talk about the journey that Airvantage went through, specifically around machine learning, look at the benefits that you're currently enjoying. What we'll also do is explore how you're using H2O technology across a number of different use cases, and we'll drill specifically down into those, and then also get a view of where you're going next with machine learning. So if we start at the start, how did the machine learning journey really begin at Airvantage, Marom?
So it's actually quite interesting. I mean, now machine learning is almost like a buzzword, but I think just 5, 6, 7 years ago, it wasn't so much. And even at that time, Airvantage's R&D division has been looking at machine learning, playing around with it. So it was, especially in South Africa, it was actually not even talked about at the time. So that's when we started exploring it. And over the years, we've built up the confidence to actually put it into production.
Well, that's awesome. It's really good to hear that you've gone through that journey and build up some confidence. So why did you, at that point in time, feel that Airvantage needed machine learning?
So the way Airvantage worked before machine learning, it had a pretty advanced credit rules system. And was designed by real experts in the credit industry. The whole team of them working on this, always tweaking it, etc. And over time, it's become a pretty impressive system, impressive part of IP. But we couldn't help but think that with the amounts of volumes of data that we get, talking about millions of advances in any given month, that there was a better way, and we were absolutely sure that a machine could do it, although we weren't sure how yet exactly.
Got you. So I'd imagine you had you talked about having a fairly sophisticated system, but it probably needed a number of people to manage that. And then with all the data that was coming in, how do you then keep that machine learning, keep that system up to date and making the most accurate decision? So what I've really found over the last decade or so is one of the key challenges that organizations face is convincing key stakeholders to move from this rule-based system that you talked about to one that is based on machine learning. What were the specific challenges that you faced moving key stakeholders from that, this is how it's done now, to this is actually a better way of doing it?
Yeah, I mean, we faced quite a bit of challenges in the beginning. So obviously there's the technical challenges of how you actually make this thing work, specifically around how you take things to production. It's a lot easier to work on something in the background, research and development. It's much harder to put it into companies' operations. So that was definitely one of them. Another big one for us is, although we had pretty enthusiastic support from some of our executives, it's always not widespread support. So there is a bit of skepticism in trying to convince people that a machine can do something better than a team of experts. So that was a pretty big challenge as well.
And how did you sort of take people on that particular journey? How did you take them from being a skeptic to actually going, this is going to add value to the business?
Yeah, so I mean, it's kind of there's a few angles to it. So one is the key executives that supported the move towards machine learning were crucial in this to convince the other stakeholders. But apart from that, we also took the approach of following the money. That if we could prove, even research and development, to run a simulation and show that we can make X amount of dollars more or something like that, or expand our service to X% more customers. That's generally something that is able to get quite a lot of buy-in because it's hard numbers, it's hard to argue with. And in that sense, when someone sees the value that something could drive, even if it's going to be difficult and a big mission to put into production and make work, they can see that it's worth the risk. And so eventually, once we've shown the numbers, it became sort of an easy transition.
Awesome. So really, I pick up the sort of two key points there. That C-level sponsorship is critical because then that will disseminate down the rest of the organization, but then also really demonstrate that business value. Yeah, I think you articulate that really well in the fact that if you can't argue with the numbers. So that's some good takeaways there. So if we think about then more around the benefits of machine learning, and that links into a bit of the business value, I truly believe that machine learning is a complete and utter waste of time and resource if we can't help business deliver some sort of financial gain. So when it comes to your specific use case at Airvantage, what are the business benefits that you're currently getting from the system?
So in a lending environment, every dollar that you're able to give is directly related to revenue. So if you can extend your service to more people, it provides better customer service and adds more value. Same with bad debt. Every dollar you save from an advance not being repaid goes directly to the bottom line. So in terms of that, so that's kind of the backbone of the business case. But for us, where we really got the biggest amount of buy-in and things just started to flow from is from our first use case. Our goal was just to extend our service to more people. The people we're currently rejecting, see if there's opportunity to extend the service further. And in our first test, it was somewhere around like 10,000 more advances per day, which is a pretty big number. And even with like pretty low bad debt, it was well within our target range. So from there, it was it kind of the business case was solidified and it sort of funded itself.
Awesome, awesome stuff. And just actually trying to link into a question that's come through on the Q&A. Did you start small, so with a small capital outlay, and then prove the benefit and then start to increase the number of people that are working on this? Or did you sort of go with a very large capital outlay? How did you go about that?
So I guess from our side, we've taken on quite a lot of skills within our R&D division. So there's a lot of data skills existing in the company. So the way we've sort of tried to work our way towards doing it in a rational fashion is to just bring the people that were missing, and there weren't that many skills that were still missing from our team to put these sorts of things to production. So you could say yes, as a whole, there was a big capital outlay, but for us, we saw data as a crucial resource, and it was almost gradual. And of course, since then, there's much more outlay towards it since we've productionized it.
Excellent. So really that momentum has driven further investment that then drives further results and then further investment. And so the story then goes. Now that's awesome. So you talked about Airvantage really gaining additional revenue from machine learning. Are there any other benefits that machine learning has given to Airvantage?
Yeah, so I mean, revenue is just one side of the coin, but for us to what we consider good long-term sustainable business is happy customers. So from our perspective, the biggest thing we've been able to do is extend our service to a larger audience, which has been really helpful, as well as granting higher values to our best customers so that it's more relevant to them. So effectively, we're giving them more choice of what sort of credit lines apply to them.
Oh, well, that's awesome. So you've got happy customers, you've increased the revenue that the organization is making. What about reducing the cost base? Have you had any benefits of that?
Oh, sure. So from our side, there's as I mentioned before, in any business like ours, every dollar saved on bad debt directly impacts the bottom line. And we saw a pretty large decrease in bad debt. So I think it was 19% lower than what it was.
Awesome. And no, that's awesome. That's really good. So linking in, again, I've got a question coming in. You talked about the Airvantage really building a culture on data. How did the organization deal with data management challenges? Because clearly you was getting lots of transactional data coming through. So how did you deal with that?
Sure. So in terms of data management is obviously very much key in our industry. We're dealing with billions and billions of rows of data points. And they're all coming from different sources, and all our systems run on customer premises. So it leads to a lot of data management challenges for sure. Our team specifically is very skilled at parsing the raw information that we get from customers to be able to put it into a really clean sort of form. And we've put a lot of effort and a lot of resources behind that. We didn't even look at machine learning or any of that stuff before that. That's really a key. And right now, I'd say our data environment's pretty clean. It's a pleasure to work with from a machine learning perspective.
Awesome. And no, that's awesome to hear. One thing that someone's mentioned is that you said that machine learning is really much harder in production than in an R&D perspective. In your view, what makes it hard specifically?
Sure. So there's a lot of challenges from an R&D environment. R&D environment's, of course, very clean, whereas a production environment has to deal with all types of other system challenges. It has to fit in with the rest of the systems. So that's definitely one big challenge. The other important part that's difficult, specifically in our environment, is that we're working with high volumes. So if we want to be able to make decisions on the fly, meaning like sub 0.3 seconds, and make several million of those a day, you have to have your algorithms be highly performant, which is always a bit of a challenge. It's something to work through.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, in the fact that machine learning isn't just about building the models. It's about how do you build a model that is highly accurate, but how do you then take it and put it into an environment that is highly scalable and has a very quick turnaround, as you talked about. And that's one of the challenges that I've definitely seen working with organizations of, do they have to sacrifice accuracy for complexity? Because clearly the more complex a model is, then the theory goes that it's going to take slightly longer to execute when in production. So it's really interesting to hear that that was something that you were having to deal with when moving out of R&D into production. So in terms of then Airvantage and our relationship with yourselves at H2O, so we are very honored and privileged to have been chosen as Airvantage's machine learning technology. So, but first things first, how did you first hear about H2O.ai?
So actually, we conducted pretty extensive research before we chose any specific tool. I believe, including like the various cloud platforms and their various services, it was somewhere around 40, which is a pretty big number.
Did you just say 40?
40, yeah. H2O was one of those solutions, and we had a few metrics and that we measured all our solutions across, and was undoubtedly the best.
Oh, well, that's also, yeah. So how did you go through that process of whittling down from 40 to just one?
So it wasn't easy, that's for sure, but we did have metrics set out in advanced criteria for what we want, including cost, ease of productionizing models, making them explainable, a whole series of metrics that we tracked, and we found that H2O was the best among them for us. We did actually do proof of concepts with our 4 or 5 top ones, and that sort of whittled it down to one.
Got you. Yeah, I remember working with you on that proof of concept. And as we went through that proof of concept, I think it was really good because you started to get an experience of what it was like to work with the wider team. So how did you find the individuals that you were working with?
That's actually the point that sort of tipped it over the scales for us. So working with the team at H2O has been fantastic. In the sense that the people we felt that they knew exactly what they were talking about, and they could give us people who have some credit experience, for example. And for us, that's a big deal because we don't have to explain to somebody, a new person, how credit works when we're having a discussion. It just sort of flows and starts very quickly. So that sort of support has been actually a huge factor.
Awesome. Well, yeah, and as I've talked about, it's a real honor to work with you. And a lot of the people that have worked on your particular project have really enjoyed testing their data science skills to make those models more and more accurate. In terms of those models becoming accurate, just slightly, again, pick up some questions from the Q&A, is what types of models are you dealing with? Are you dealing with fairly simple sort of regression type models, or are you actually using more complicated neural network models?
Sorry, is this before H2O or right now?
No, just right now.
So actually, I guess actually the answer would be the same. So from our perspective, we've kind of tried everything. My personal interest has been deep learning for a long while. We've sort of experimented with all of it. Yeah, so I guess it depends on the use case. We really use a whole bunch. So I mean, it's a combination of binary classification, regression, and backing those, it's a whole range of algorithms, like the most popular tree-based methods as well as neural networks. That's I'd say the backbone.
Okay, so that sort of leads us into a really interesting point. So because you're using complicated neural networks, one of the big challenges that you have with those is that they are very black box in their nature. And then that links into one of the perceived disadvantages of machine learning, which is really a lack of trust that people then have in those algorithms, because they go, well, it just seems to be data in, decision out, computer says yes, computer says no. I'm not really sure that I trust that. So how did you help overcome that particular problem, especially as you work in that financial industry of giving credit to customers?
Look, I mean, obviously that's a very important aspect. People, that was one of the challenges, which I don't think I mentioned. So part of gaining acceptance and getting buy-in from people is showing them how things work. And we found H2O to be extremely helpful with that, to build our own explainability processes we found to be quite difficult. And using H2O, we can say we'll go literally example by example of predictions, and we'll check a couple with the credit team and see, hey, does this prediction make sense? And we'll look at the various factors that affected it, which H2O makes a lot faster to get to. That's something we definitely do. We actually do it for every model we launch before we launch it.
Okay, so you sounds like you get a individual explainability for each individual prediction that you're making, as well as then an overall understanding of the model as well. So
yeah, absolutely crucial. We want to check that there's nothing that's potentially that we didn't make. It helps us sort of identify mistakes that we may have made somewhere in the modeling process, but by seeing that things make sense, it like mitigates that risk a lot.
So when you say mistakes in the modeling process, is that things like data leakage? So using bits of information that isn't available when you make a particular decision?
Certainly, especially when we're trialing new features, there's always a risk that there'll be some leakage in there, and we do test them. We do test our features and double and triple check them, but those mistakes sometimes still do creep in.
So over here in Europe, we have a number of different layers of regulation. We have GDPR, we have the Financial Credit Authority that has specific regulations. Do you have something similar in South Africa?
Certainly, we have a Protection of Personal Information Act, which we're always very aware of. So we're very careful about that stuff. And along that line, all our systems run on premises at the telecommunications company's premises and follow their own guidelines, so that we sort of circumvent a lot of these potential issues.
Okay, and that's one of the challenges that all organizations have to face, in the fact that they have to make sure that any decisioning technology that they put in place also map around industry regulations. So it's good to hear that you've been able to navigate that particular path on your journey. So if we think about the future and where Airvantage is going with machine learning moving forward, what do you see as next in the journey?
So there are a couple. From our perspective, we started to put in a lot of stuff on the monitoring side. It's sort of an ongoing effort, but it's something we're working towards. So very advanced sort of feature drift detection, and that feeds into all our BI systems. We currently have that, but we're working on call it a Gen 2, which actually which is also a pretty great thing about H2O. We've met the team here and there just to bounce ideas, and also been very helpful. That's a major initiative for us at the moment.
Awesome. Well, that's great. It's good. One phrase that I use a lot, and an ex-colleague used it, and I borrowed it and used on many occasions, is machine learning models are a little bit like fish in the fact that they go off. And the real key is to make sure that we are constantly monitoring the performance of those machine learning models, both the output of those, but also, as you talked about, the inputs, those features, and how are those features changing over time? Is there some sort of drift as the population base changes, and having metrics that then automate that process of rebuilding those machine learning models. So,
which is actually crucial to us in times of change. I mean, when COVID hit, I think a lot of people in the industry found that to be quite a struggle. For us, we were able to identify it pretty quickly and react pretty flexibly, which was a big game changer. And that's why we're putting even more resources towards this, because we've seen the value.
And that's a really good point, because I'm pretty sure that speed, that level of agility would have been hard to perform with an existing system that was very much rules-based and people-driven. Awesome. So I'm very conscious that we're just closing to the end of our time together, and also, but is there one piece of advice? If there's one piece of advice that you'd like to share with the audience, what would that be?
I think if people are looking to work on a specific tool, they should make sure that they've checked what's out there in the market, and they know in advance what they're looking for. And even though the technology is important, a really important part is the people. We think that's way more important. So whether it's internally or external partners like H2O for us, I believe that's where the focus should be.
Excellent. So, and that's quite interesting, because a lot of the time when we're talking about machine learning, we focus down into the technology, the algorithm, rather than actually going, well, the human is also important and really critical person in this particular process. Well, Marom, I'd like to thank you for your time. 24 hours ago, I wasn't sure that this session would be going because you had lost your voice. So thank you so much for taking the time out to have this conversation. We've pretty much covered a lot of the questions that have been answered, so I'll save your voice and won't go through the last few. So that's really all that there is. Everyone who's joined this particular call, thank you so much for your time. We hope you found it to have been of use, and have a great rest of the day.
Nice chatting, John.
Yeah, thank you, John and Marom, for taking the time today, and thank you to everyone who joined us. We would love to get your feedback, so please answer the quick survey that will come up after we close the event. We hope you enjoyed the presentation. Stay tuned for upcoming events and have a great day. Thanks, everyone. Bye.